What if the one decision meant to save your life also became the moment that changed your destiny forever? Catherine Foster felt that truth settle in her chest as the stagecoach rattled across the dusty Texas road. Her fingers tightened around her small leather satchel until her knuckles turned white. Everything she owned was inside that bag. Everything she hoped to escape was behind her. And everything uncertain lay ahead. The Texas land stretched far in every direction, wild and open, so different from the elegant gardens of Boston she had known her entire life. Out here the world felt bigger, louder, and dangerously free. Catherine was not used to freedom. She had been trained to obey, to smile, to behave. Yet here she was, running for her life. "First time in Bandera, miss?" the elderly woman across from her asked kindly. Her wrinkled face carried the warmth of someone who had weathered many years under the Texas sun. "Yes, madam," Catherine answered, forcing a polite smile. "I'm visiting family." A lie, a bitter lie. She had no family in Texas, not anymore. Her mother had died 5 years ago, and the father she once believed loved her had promised her to Harold Whitcomb, a wealthy man 3 decades older, with cold eyes and darker intentions. A man whose first wife had died under suspicious circumstances. A man Catherine refused to become bound to. When she learned the truth, she gathered her hidden savings, packed one small bag, and boarded the train west. No one knew she was gone. Not yet. The stagecoach hit a deep rut, jolting her sharply. Outside, Bandera came into view, a cluster of weathered wooden buildings rising out of the dust, like survivors of a long battle with the land. The San Antonio River glimmered in the distance. "Bandera, folks," the driver shouted. "We'll be stopping an hour before moving on to Kerrville." But Catherine would not be moving on. Bandera was where she intended to disappear. Here she would no longer be the polished, perfect Elena Catherine Foster of Boston society. Here she would become simply Catherine, or maybe Kathy, a woman who chose her own fate. The stagecoach stopped, and she stepped down onto the dusty street. The Texas heat wrapped around her despite the September air. She kept her gaze low, clutching her single satchel as her boots settled in the dirt. "Need help with your luggage, miss?" a deep voice asked. Catherine turned. A tall cowboy regarded her with eyes the color of the Texas sky. His hat shadowed his strong jaw and the faint stubble along it. His clothes were dusty from the trail, yet neat, as though he cared enough to look presentable even after long hours under the sun. "I can manage, thank you," Catherine said quickly, holding her bag closer. "Suit yourself," he replied with a nod, turning toward the stagecoach driver. "Any mail for the Quinn Ranch, Pete?" "Just this, Zach," Pete answered, handing him a small bundle tied with string. "Your pa expecting anything urgent?" "Always is," Zach said with a laugh. Catherine used their conversation to slip away into the hotel. She did not know who this Zach was, but she knew one thing. She did not need attention, not from any man, not ever again. Inside, the hotel lobby was modest but clean. A middle-aged woman behind the desk looked up and smiled warmly. "Room for the night, dear?" "Yes, please," Catherine replied, "and I was wondering if there's any work in town. I need employment." The woman's eyebrows lifted with interest. "On your own, are you?" Catherine nodded once. "Well, Mrs. Miller at the diner might need help. And the school teacher, Miss Parker. She's been looking for an assistant. Can you read and write?" "Yes, madam. I'm well educated." "Good. I'm Martha Dawson. My husband and I run this hotel." Catherine hesitated before signing the registration book. Her hand shook as she wrote Catherine F., smudging the ink to blur her surname. If her father sent men after her, she would not make their search easy. "Room 4, Mrs. Dawson said. "Top of the stairs. Dinner's at 6. Don't be late, the cook is fussy." "Thank you," Catherine breathed. Upstairs, her room was small but comfortable. A narrow bed, a washstand, a small window overlooking Main Street. She set her bag down and crossed to the window. Townsfolk bustled below. Cowboys led horses to the livery. Women carried baskets. Children chased a stray dog. Her gaze landed on one person in particular. Zach, the cowboy from earlier, now mounted on a chestnut horse. His movements were smooth, confident, natural. A man at ease in his world. As he guided his horse across the street, he glanced up toward her window. Catherine stepped back at once, her heartbeat quickening. She hadn't come to Bandera looking for attention, especially not from a man like him. She wanted freedom, not trouble. But the image of his sky-blue eyes stayed with her longer than she expected. The next morning, Catherine woke before sunrise. She could not afford to waste time. Her savings would last 2 weeks, maybe 3 if she lived carefully. She dressed in her plain navy gown and pinned her honey-brown hair neatly. Looking in the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a woman leaving behind a life, stepping into another. After breakfast, she headed to the schoolhouse. Bandera was already alive with movement. Merchants swept their storefronts. Ranch hands led horses through the street. The dusty smell of earth and animals filled the air, a scent so unfamiliar it made her feel strangely small and strangely alive. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, painted white with a small bell tower. Catherine hesitated at the door, then knocked. The reciting students went silent. Moments later, the door opened, revealing a woman with spectacles and a kind yet tired face. "Yes?" she asked. "Good morning," Catherine said politely. "I'm Catherine. Mrs. Dawson mentioned you might need an assistant." The woman brightened immediately. "Miss Abigail Parker, please come in." Inside were about 20 students, ages ranging from small children to nearly grown teens. All sat at wooden desks facing a chalkboard crowded with arithmetic problems. "Children, continue your sums," Miss Parker said. Then she led Catherine aside. "You arrived like an answer to prayer," Miss Parker whispered. "I teach all ages at once, and it's impossible alone." "I understand. I taught children in Boston," Catherine said. "I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and even basic Latin." "Latin?" Miss Parker breathed. "My goodness. When could you start?" "Immediately," Catherine said, hope stirring in her chest. "Wonderful. The pay is $8 a week. Not much, but all the school board can manage." "It will do," Catherine assured her. Just then, the door burst open. A boy of about 10 rushed inside. "Sorry I'm late, Miss Parker. Pye's horse got loose and I had to help catch him." "This is the 3rd time this week, Thomas Quinn," Miss Parker scolded lightly. "Take your seat. And you'll be helping Miss Catherine after school with organizing the books." As he passed, he whispered to Catherine, "Are you really our new teacher?" "Assistant teacher," she corrected with a smile. "My Uncle Zach says we need more pretty ladies in Bandera," Thomas whispered boldly. Catherine's cheeks warmed. So the blue-eyed cowboy had a nephew, and now she would be teaching him. She had come to Bandera to disappear, to hide, to be invisible. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Catherine Foster had survived Boston's strict society. She had survived the train west. She had survived stepping off that stagecoach with nothing but fear and determination. But nothing prepared her for the way Zachary Quinn's presence stirred something warm and unsettling inside her. She spent her first week teaching at the schoolhouse, settling into a routine she never thought she could build so far from everything she'd known. Bandera's people were kind. Miss Parker trusted her without question. Mrs. Jenkins watched out for her like a protective aunt. And little Thomas Quinn, with his missing tooth and boundless energy, attached himself to her like a burr that refused to let go. But Zach, he was different. Every time she caught sight of him riding through town, her pulse quickened. He always tipped his hat, always smiled, always made her feel seen in a way no man ever had. And that terrified her. She didn't come to Texas for attention. She came to disappear. Still, when the Founders' Day dance approached, she found herself wishing, just for a moment, that Zach might be there. The night of the dance arrived faster than she expected. Miss Parker helped her ribbon her hair. Mrs. Jenkins gifted her a green dress that fit perfectly after a few small alterations. When Catherine stepped into the barn decorated with lanterns, quilts, and freshly cut wildflowers, she felt like she had stepped into another world, a simpler one, a warmer one. The whole town was there, laughing and talking as the musicians struck up lively music. Catherine barely had time to gather her courage before she heard his voice. Miss Catherine. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Zach stood behind her, freshly shaved, wearing a crisp white shirt and black trousers. He looked even more handsome than the first time she saw him. His smile softened as he took her in. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Your nephew insisted," Catherine said, trying not to blush. "Thomas tends to get what he wants," Zach chuckled. "He's convinced you're the best thing to happen to the schoolhouse since the bell was installed." Catherine laughed softly. "He's a smart boy." Quote, "He is," Zach said, his gaze warm on her, "and he's usually right about people." Before she could reply, the band struck up a reel. Zach offered his arm. "Would you join me?" Catherine hesitated. It was foolish, dangerous even. She shouldn't draw attention. The fewer people noticed her, the safer she would be. But something in Zach's sky-blue eyes told her she could trust this moment. "Yes," she said quietly. As they danced, she realized Zach moved with a grace she didn't expect from a rancher. He guided her easily, matching her steps as though they had danced together many times before. "Yeah, say you weren't much of a dancer," he teased. "I may have stretched the truth." He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. "I figured. Boston girls rarely have two left feet." Catherine froze. "How did you know I was from Boston?" "The way you speak, the way you hold yourself, the way you look around like you're expecting the walls to judge you." Her heart pounded. "I didn't mean to pry," Zach added quickly. "Everyone who comes west is running from something or towards something. I'm not here to dig up your past, Catherine, only to say you don't have to hide who you are here." She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't ready to tell him everything. Not the arranged marriage, not the cruelty of Harold Whitcomb, not the fear that still clung to her like a shadow. But she felt seen. And, strangely, safe. When the song ended, Zach guided her outside toward a small hill overlooking the lantern-lit barn. The stars stretched endlessly above them. "This is why I stayed in Texas," he said quietly. "This land gives a man room to breathe." Catherine nodded. "It feels like freedom." "Exactly." Silence fell, warm and comfortable. Then Zach turned, his voice steady. "I don't know what brought you to Bandera, Catherine, but I want you to know, if you ever need help, all you have to do is ask." Her breath caught. No questions? No judgments. No one had ever offered her that before, not even her own father. Before she could respond, a shout echoed across the field. "Uncle Zach! Miss Catherine! They're cutting the cake!" Quote. Thomas's voice broke the moment, and they both laughed. "We should go," Catherine said, though she didn't move. Zach hesitated. "Catherine, earlier tonight, before Thomas yelled, I was going to tell you something." Her heart thumped. "And what was that?" "That I haven't been able to stop thinking of you since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach." The world seemed to tilt. Before she had the chance to breathe, to speak, to react, townsfolk spilled out of the barn calling for them. Zach stepped back, offering his hand. "Come on. If we're late, Mrs. Henderson will tan both our hides." She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his palm and the spark that shot through her at his touch. They walked back together under the Texas sky, and for the first time since fleeing Boston, Catherine felt the faintest spark of hope. But that hope shattered a week later. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Catherine and Mrs. Jenkins were sorting fabric in the shop when the bell above the door chimed. A tall, well-dressed man stepped inside. His expensive suit, polished boots, and Eastern accent chilled Catherine instantly. "I'm looking for a young woman," he said. "Lena Catherine Foster." Catherine's heart stopped. A photograph appeared in his hand. Her portrait. Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. "Don't know her." But the man did not leave. He questioned everyone in town. He carried money, influence, pressure, and he was not leaving until he found her. Catherine felt the walls closing in. She was running out of time. Then the door opened again. Zach stepped inside, his expression dark with urgency. "Catherine," he said, striding toward her. "Mrs. Jenkins told me." She broke. In front of Mrs. Jenkins, in front of the shop counter, in front of the thread and ribbons and bolts of cloth, She crumpled into Zach's arms as fear she had held inside for months finally erupted. "I'm found," she whispered. "He'll take me back." "Over my dead body," Zach growled. He held her tightly, protectively, like she was someone worth fighting for. "Come with me," he said. "Come to the ranch. You'll be safe there." Quote, "Zach," she whispered through her tears, "why are you doing this? Why risk everything for me?" His answer came softly but firmly. "Because I'm falling in love with you, Catherine Foster, and I won't let anyone take you away." Her heart thundered. Zach, I don't know what to—" "You don't have to say anything right now. Just come with me." She looked into his eyes and saw truth, strength, freedom. The very thing she came west to find. "Yes," she whispered, "take me with you." And he did. He gathered her bag, took her trembling hand, and led her out into the fading Texas sunlight, toward the Quinn Ranch, toward safety, and toward a love she had never believed she'd find. Because Catherine Foster had fled an arranged marriage. But now she was running toward a cowboy who understood freedom. Catherine Foster had known fear in Boston. She had known fear on the train west, but she had never known fear like the moment she stepped into the hotel dining room to face Harold Whitcomb, the man she had fled, the man who believed he owned her. Yet when she sat across from him, chin lifted, hands folded to hide the trembling, something inside her had changed. She wasn't the frightened girl who boarded a stagecoach anymore. She was Catherine Quinn now, Zach's wife, a woman with a name she chose, a life she fought for. And as she stared into the cold face of the man who once held her fate in his hands, she realized something powerful. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not with Zach standing just outside the door. Not with Sheriff Taylor behind her. Not with Reverend Wilson nearby. Not with the Quinn family ready to protect her. Harold Whitcomb had money. He had influence. But he no longer had her. And he knew it. Catherine held his gaze and spoke the words she once believed she'd never have the courage to say. "I will never marry you." The fury behind Whitcomb's eyes flickered, then faltered. Her boldness unsettled him. His threats meant nothing here. His power meant nothing here. His name meant nothing here. He was a man standing alone in a town that would never bow to him. And Catherine Quinn was a woman surrounded by people who believed in her. Whitcomb tried to intimidate her, tried to question the marriage, tried to imply danger toward the Quinn Ranch. But Catherine didn't bend. Not once. Not even when her voice shook. Not even when his eyes flashed with anger. Zach stepped in at the end, not to fight her battles, but to stand beside her. Shoulder to shoulder. Equal to equal. And that was what finally broke Whitcomb. He realized Catherine's decision was final. Her marriage was real. Her resolve was unshakable. And she was no longer his to claim. With one last cold glance, he left Bandera and disappeared from her life forever. It was done. She was free. Truly free. What followed was everything Catherine once believed she would never have. A life built on love, choice, and belonging. She settled into ranch life with the Quinns, and despite the danger that had chased her across the country, she found peace in the rhythm of the land. Mornings were filled with soft sunlight, the smell of coffee, and Zach's warm voice greeting her with quiet affection. Afternoons were spent teaching Thomas, helping Sarah, or walking the open fields that felt like freedom itself. Evenings were the best, hours spent with Zach, talking, laughing, dreaming, living. And when the moment came, quietly and naturally, they became husband and wife not out of fear, but out of love. Their wedding at the Quinn Ranch was simple, warm, and filled with the people who had become her true family. Catherine wore a pale blue dress Sarah helped alter. Zach held her hands as if she was something precious, and when they exchanged vows, she knew she had found what she never had in Boston, a partner, not a prison. Their life together began gently, deeply, beautifully, and the love they shared only grew with time. Years passed. The danger faded. Bandera flourished. The Quinn Ranch thrived. And Catherine Quinn became the woman she once only dreamed she could be. On a warm spring afternoon 5 years later, she sat on the porch of her home, the home she and Zach built with their own hands. Their 3-year-old daughter Elizabeth laughed as she chased butterflies across the yard. Catherine's hand rested on her rounded belly, feeling the gentle kicks of their second child. The sound of hoofbeats drifted from the road. Zach rode home in the golden glow of sunset, Thomas and Sarah behind him. Catherine still felt that same flutter in her heart when she saw him. The same one she felt the day she stepped off the stagecoach and saw him standing there with sky-blue eyes and a quiet strength that called to her soul. Zach dismounted, swept Elizabeth into his arms, then came straight to Catherine. He knelt beside her chair, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, and kissed her forehead softly. "Missed you," he murmured. "Missed you more," she whispered. He laughed, that warm sound she loved, and placed a hand over her belly. "How's our boy today?" "Practicing his kicks." "That's my son," Zach grinned. Catherine smiled, her heart full. 5 years ago, she had fled an arranged marriage. She had fled fear. She had fled a future she never wanted. Now she lived a life she chose, with the man she loved, in the place she belonged. As the sun dipped below the Texas hills, painting the sky in colors of fire and honey, Catherine leaned into Zach and whispered the truth she had learned through every hardship, every mile, every breath since the day she ran. Freedom isn't something you find. It's something you choose. And she had chosen him. She had chosen love. She had chosen a life where she could finally breathe. Catherine Foster had fled an arranged marriage. But as Catherine Quinn, she found far more than safety. She found family. She found purpose. She found freedom. And most of all, she found a cowboy who understood her heart better than anyone ever had. She found home.